I still don't know if what happened that night was bad luck or something far worse. I'm recording this using voice to text on my phone because typing everything out feels impossible, and I've never been great at telling stories anyway. This all happened years ago. Maybe 6, maybe 8. Time kind of blends together when your life goes off the rails, and mine definitely did after that night. It was New Year's Eve. Back when I was still dating my ex, Laura. We were driving home after a party when everything fell apart. It was well past midnight. I remember that clearly because I was exhausted to the point where my body felt heavier than my thoughts. Driving that night was a terrible idea, especially on New Year's Eve, but we didn't really have a choice. The party had been at one of Laura's friends' places. We were invited last minute, which meant there was nowhere for us to stay overnight. No couch, no spare bed, nothing. So, we had to drive back. The trip wasn't short either, around half an hour or so. The roads were almost completely empty, which I was honestly grateful for. It had snowed earlier that day, and the streets were covered in ice. The last thing I needed was traffic on top of already dangerous conditions. Lara was half asleep in the passenger seat. I had the heater blasting and some random rock music playing, just loud enough to keep me awake. You know that feeling when you're fighting sleep, but your brain keeps drifting anyway. We were maybe 10 minutes away from her place when it happened. I still struggle to explain what I saw. 1 second, the road ahead was completely clear. No cars, no people, nothing. And then suddenly, there was a woman standing right in the middle of the street. She wasn't crossing. She wasn't moving at all. She was just standing there, facing my car, like she had been waiting for us. My brain lagged behind my body. I hit the brakes before I even fully understood what I was seeing. Then I noticed the knife. She was holding it down by her side. A huge kitchen knife, the kind you'd use to carve meat, not something small or subtle. My headlights lit her up completely, and I could see her face clearly. It was twisted, distorted, like she was crying, screaming, or both at the same time. It made my stomach turn. I don't think I've ever reacted faster in my life. I jerked the steering wheel to the right to avoid hitting her, but the moment I did, she lunged toward the car. I heard the impact before my mind caught up. In the middle of all that chaos, I somehow understood exactly what happened. She had swung the knife at my car as I passed. Even though I missed her, the combination of the sudden turn and the ice was too much. The tires lost traction, and the car started spinning. Asterisk by that point, Lara was wide awake and panicking. She started shouting, asking what was happening, screaming my name. I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands hurt, like that would somehow give me control back. But it didn't. The car wasn't responding to anything I did. We spun completely around, a full 180, and finally came to a stop facing the opposite direction. For a brief second, there was silence. That horrible, ringing silence that comes right after you realize you almost died. Then I looked up through the windshield and felt my stomach drop. We were facing the way we had just come from, which meant we were facing her. She was still there, about 30 feet away, still holding the knife. My headlights lit her up perfectly, like something out of a nightmare or a cheap horror movie. She started moving toward us, not running, not walking normally, limping, like she was trying to move fast, but her body wouldn't cooperate. She was screaming, but not words, just this deep, animal sound that didn't sound human at all. To this day, that might be the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. Lara was yelling at me to do something, anything, but I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. The woman kept getting closer. Her clothes were ripped and filthy. Her hair was tangled and wild. I don't know if she was high, mentally unstable, or something else entirely, but there was nothing in her eyes. No awareness, no emotion. She looked like a corpse that hadn't realized it was dead yet. When she got to about 15 feet away, something inside me finally snapped. Pure survival instinct. I threw the car into drive and floored it. The tires spun uselessly on the ice for a second that felt like an eternity. Then they caught, and we started moving. For a brief moment, I thought we were safe. I really believed that was the end of it. I was wrong. I still don't understand how she moved that fast. 1 second she was in front of us, the next she was on the hood. She threw herself onto the car, and the impact shook the entire vehicle. Lara was screaming. I was yelling without even realizing it. The woman clung to the hood with one hand and started stabbing the windshield with the other. Over and over again, it felt like she was trying to get inside, like she wanted to kill me. I was convinced I was about to die. I couldn't think. I couldn't see properly. I just started yanking the steering wheel left and right as hard as I could. Her body slid across the hood, but she wouldn't let go. She kept screaming that horrible, wordless scream, her face pressed inches from the glass. And I swear her eyes never left mine. On the third or fourth hard swerve, she finally lost her grip. I watched her roll off the hood and slam into the pavement before sliding into the shoulder of the road. The car fishtailed again, but this time I managed to keep control. I looked into the rearview mirror and saw her lying there on the road. She wasn't moving, not even a little, and for a split second, I actually thought about stopping. I know how insane that sounds after what just happened, but my mind went there anyway. I thought maybe I had killed her. Maybe she was just a deeply disturbed person who needed help, and I had just ended her life. Lara grabbed my arm and told me not to stop. She was shaking uncontrollably, telling me we had to leave, that it wasn't our responsibility, that we couldn't get involved. I said we should call the police, at least report what happened. She shut that idea down immediately. She said they would blame us because we had been drinking, that no one would believe our story, that we'd end up arrested or worse. Looking back, none of that logic really holds up. But in that moment, the way she said it made everything feel urgent and unavoidable. Lara had always been like that, convincing, calm when it mattered, just manipulative enough to make you doubt your own instincts. So I didn't stop. I drove all the way home and didn't tell anyone what happened. Even saying that now makes me feel sick. The damage to the car wasn't even that severe. A cracked windshield, deep knife marks on the driver's side window, a few long scratches across the hood. There wasn't any blood. Not on the hood. No, on the windshield. Nothing. I got everything repaired about a week later, but the guilt stayed with me for months. I kept checking the local news every day, waiting to see something. A body found on the side of the road. A missing person report. Anything. But nothing ever showed up. No articles. No updates. No rumors. And honestly, I still don't know if that made me feel better or worse. Part of me thinks she got up after we left and disappeared into the woods. Another part of me doesn't want to know the truth at all. What really messed with me, though, was Lara. She acted like nothing had happened. Within a couple of days, she was completely back to normal, making plans, going out with friends, laughing, living her life like that night never existed. I brought it up once. Just once. She got irritated and told me I was overreacting, that we did what we had to do. I remember staring at her, trying to understand how someone could be so cold. A woman tried to kill us. We might have killed her, and you're just ready to forget it. We broke up a few months later for reasons that had nothing to do with that night. At least, that's what I tell myself. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't change how I saw her forever. Maybe I'm the crazy one. But something like that doesn't just fade away. You don't move on from it in 2 days. Someone might have lost their life that night. I almost lost mine. That's not the kind of thing you forget. Ever. I still can't explain what happened that New Year's Eve. And the more time passes, the less normal it feels. I've replayed it in my head more times than I can count, trying to convince myself there's a logical answer. So far, I haven't found one. I went to UCLA for undergrad. That's where I met one of my closest friends, a guy I'll call Daniel. His real name is different, but when we first met during freshman year, he introduced himself using his American name, and it just stuck. He's originally from Singapore and came to the US to study computer science. To this day, he's one of the smartest people I've ever known. After we graduated, life sent us in opposite directions. I moved to New York for work, and he went back to Singapore for his career. We're both in our late 20s now, both doing well professionally, and both single. Despite the distance, we make an effort to see each other at least once or twice a year. Sometimes he visits me. Sometimes I fly to Asia. I know how lucky that makes us, so I never take it for granted. This happened last New Year's Eve, and it hasn't left my mind since. I've told a few people about it, but no one really knows what to make of it. Honestly, neither do I. There's something important to understand first. Singapore is 13 hours ahead of New York. When it's midnight there, it's still late morning on December 31st in New York City. Daniel celebrates both Western New Year and Lunar New Year, so he was out partying that night. Just many hours before I was. I spent my New Year's Eve with my two closest friends in the city, Noah and Eli. We started the night drinking at Noah's apartment, then headed to a rooftop party in Brooklyn that one of Eli's coworkers had invited us to. It was surprisingly nice, trendy, crowded, and expensive in that very specific Brooklyn way. Around 11:30, I noticed a girl standing alone near the bar. I don't usually do this, but I walked up and introduced myself. We clicked immediately. She had this presence about her, something hard to describe, effortless to talk to, sharp, funny, completely engaged. In the moment, we talked for maybe 5 minutes before she grabbed my hand and pulled me onto the dance floor. Her name was Marin. I remember asking her to repeat it because I'd never heard it before. She laughed and said most people just call her Mare because it's easier. I like that. She took a pen from her pocket and wrote her name on my hand, just in case I forgot. From there, everything moved fast. We danced, talked, and kissed when the clock hit midnight. By about 12:30, she asked if I wanted to leave. We called an Uber and went back to my apartment in the East Village. I'll skip over the obvious details of what happened next, but I'll say this. It was a really good night. Afterward, we stayed up talking for a long time, just lying there, getting to know each other. I learned a lot about her, or at least I thought I did. Here's everything I remember. She said she was originally from Santa Barbara. She was an artist, specifically a painter, though she mentioned she used to do street art and large murals before moving into more traditional work. Her middle name was Elise, which also happened to be the name of one of her cats. The other cat was named Orbit. Her birthday was April 30th. Her best friend growing up lived in a tiny town in France that I'd never heard of. Her dad worked as a corporate lawyer. They sound like random details. I know. At the time, they meant nothing. Later, they meant everything. At some point, she mentioned that her clothes smelled like smoke and alcohol from the party, so I offered to wash them for her. I threw everything into the machine, and she borrowed one of my t-shirts to sleep in. Not long after that, we both fell asleep. I don't remember what time it was. When I woke up the next morning, she was gone. At first, I didn't panic. People leave after hookups. It happens all the time. I figured she slipped out early to avoid that awkward morning conversation. No big deal. Then I noticed the door. My apartment has a standard lock. It can only be locked from the outside with a key. It doesn't automatically lock behind you. When I walked past the door on my way to the bathroom, I noticed the lock was still engaged. That shouldn't have been possible. Either she had locked it from the outside without a key, or she never left at all. Both explanations made no sense. I checked the rest of the apartment. It's small. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a living room, and a tiny kitchen. There's no second exit. The windows don't open more than a few inches. I even checked my closet, which felt ridiculous, like I was in a bad horror movie. But of course, she wasn't there. That's when the doubt started creeping in. I began questioning my own sanity. I wondered if I had imagined the entire night because I'd been drinking. I paced around the apartment, half expecting her to suddenly step out from somewhere and reset reality back to normal. But then I checked the dryer. Her clothes were gone, completely, and the shirt I had lent her was missing too. That meant she had slept there. That part was real, but she was nowhere to be found. I stood there for a long time, trying to come up with an explanation that made sense. I couldn't find one. To make things worse, I realized I never got her number, no Instagram, no contact info at all, for the rest of the day. I kept replaying everything I remembered about her, every detail, over and over again. I knew if I didn't, they would eventually fade. Asterisk later, that afternoon, I suddenly felt this overwhelming urge to call Daniel. I can't explain why. It wasn't planned, and I didn't even have anything specific I wanted to talk about. The impulse just came out of nowhere, strong enough that I actually listened to it. We talked for a bit, catching up like we usually do. Work, life, how we each spent New Year's Eve. Normal conversation, but something felt off. His tone was different. Eventually, I asked him what was going on. He hesitated, then told me he had met a girl the night before. They'd hit it off, gone back to his place, and she left the next morning without saying goodbye. No number, no way to contact her. He said it bothered him more than he expected. I laughed, half out of disbelief, and told him the same thing had happened to me. Not similar, identical. There was a pause on the line. Then he told me her name was Marin. I felt a chill run through my entire body. I asked him to describe her. Slowly, he started listing details. Each one made my stomach drop further. Her birthday was April 30th. She was from Santa Barbara. She was a painter who used to do street art. I stopped him and asked if she had a cat named Elise. He went quiet for a second before saying yes. After that, we spent almost 15 minutes listing every detail we could remember about her. Everything lined up, every single thing. It was disturbing in a way I don't have the words for. And then it got worse. Daniel actually had photos with her. I didn't. He sent them to me. It was the same woman. No doubt about it. We tried to rationalize it. We threw out explanation after explanation, but every single one fell apart immediately. None of it made sense. Here's why. Singapore is 13 hours ahead of New York. Daniel met her around 11 p.m. on December 31st, his time. I met her around 11:30 p.m. on December 31st, New York time. That's about a 12-hour difference. A direct flight between those two cities takes at least 15 hours, usually more. Even if she had somehow boarded a plane the second she left Daniel's apartment, she couldn't have made it to that rooftop party in Brooklyn in time. The math didn't work. It was impossible. And even if we ignore the flight time completely, there were too many other questions. How did she know to go to that exact party? How did she end up talking to me? How did she know to use the same name, the same backstory, the same personal details? We don't have answers. We've talked about it dozens of times since, and we always end up in the same place. We don't know what happened, and we probably never will. Neither of us ever saw her again. What messes with me the most is how real it all felt. I know she wasn't a hallucination. I talked to her for hours. She slept in my bed, and then she vanished from a locked apartment with no other exits. Daniel and I have tried looking her up online, but searching for a single name with no last name and vague details about an artist from California leads nowhere. We found nothing. New Year's Eve is coming up again, which is why this story has been on my mind. Usually, strange experiences fade with time. This one hasn't. If anything, it feels worse. The longer I sit with it, the harder it is to ignore the possibility that I may have spent New Year's Eve with something that was never meant to be real at all. This is one of my father's stories, and it's the only one he tells where he never tries to joke or soften the ending. Every time he brings it up, his voice changes, like he's back there again. Before my parents had kids, they traveled constantly. My dad had made a few smart business decisions in his mid-20s, which gave him both money and time. They were passionate skiers, but the best slopes anywhere near New York City were in Vermont. Over the years, they actually bought a few ski lodges up there. The first one was in a small town called Bellows. They bought it from a man named Harold Kane, who lived on the Upper West Side. It was an old place with dark shutters, and my dad always called it the Dark House, partly because of the shutters, partly because of the previous owner's name. They would sell partial shares to friends and rotate ownership every few months to help cover the costs. After a few years, they sold it and moved onto a second property. The second lodge was located halfway between Bellows and Rutland, right along Route 100, in an area locals referred to as the Lake Corridor. There were several lakes lined up along that road, and this house sat directly on the edge of one of them. My dad went in on that place with his close friend, Mark, and Mark's wife, Julia. My dad and Mark had known each other since college, and the four of them took trips up there together pretty often. This happened on a New Year's Eve, long before I was born. Julia and my mom were out of town for a wedding or something similar. The exact reason doesn't matter. What matters is that my dad and Mark decided to drive up to Vermont alone to spend New Year's together. It was the night of December 31st. The two of them were upstairs, drinking a few beers and catching up. The upper floor of the lodge had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the frozen lake. They would sit there listening to music, watching snow fall across the ice. It was snowing that night, but lightly, enough to be beautiful, not enough to feel trapped. My dad said it was incredibly calm, one of those rare nights where you're exactly where you want to be, far away from everything else. They had the radio on, waiting for the countdown from Times Square. And then, without warning, everything changed. They were in the middle of a conversation when a massive flash of light exploded across the lake. My dad said his first thought was fireworks, but it immediately felt wrong. The light didn't come from the sky. It came from the ground, rising upward, and there was no sound at all. Just a sudden, blinding white glow that lit up everything. Mark stood up and walked closer to the window, squinting out over the frozen lake. My dad asked him what he was looking at. Mark said he thought he saw something moving out there. At first, my dad brushed it off. It was dark, after all, but the snow on the lake reflected enough light that if you focused, you could make out shapes. After a few seconds, Mark became convinced it was a person. My dad told him that was impossible. There were no houses on the far side of the lake, no trails, no roads, nothing, just dense woods stretching for miles. There was no reason for anyone to be out there. Mark didn't listen. He started pulling on his coat and boots, saying he wanted to check it out. My dad tried to stop him, but Mark was already heading down the stairs. My dad grabbed his jacket and followed. They rushed out onto the back deck, and that's when they heard it. A voice. Young, thin, a child's voice. Someone was yelling for help. At first, it was faint, barely carrying across the frozen lake, but there was no mistaking it. A little boy was screaming for help somewhere out on the ice. The lake had been frozen solid for months. There was no danger of it breaking. Without even discussing it, they stepped off the deck and started walking across. As they moved closer, they could see him. A small figure stood on the ice, maybe 20 or 30 yards from the far shoreline. Definitely a child. My dad said he could clearly see the outline of a boy against the snow. Then there was another flash. This one was even brighter than the first. My dad said it was so intense that he dropped to his knees and covered his face. For several seconds, he couldn't see anything at all. When his vision finally returned and he looked up, the boy was gone. The lake was empty, nothing but snow and ice. That's when curiosity turned into pure fear. They turned around and ran back toward the house. My dad said he moved as fast as he could without slipping, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. Mark was a few steps ahead when he suddenly shouted and pointed up at the lodge. He was yelling that there was someone in the window, not an adult, a child. My dad looked up but only saw the dark reflection of the snow in the glass. Mark insisted he saw a little boy standing there, staring down at them from inside the house. My dad didn't argue. He didn't want to hear any more explanations. He just wanted to get inside and lock the door. They burst back into the lodge and searched every room, the bedrooms, the closets, the bathrooms, every corner of the house. There was no one there. All the doors were locked. All the windows were shut. There was no sign that anyone had been inside. After that, they decided to end the night. Neither of them wanted to talk about what they had seen. They went to their rooms and tried to sleep. Neither of them even noticed midnight come and go. My dad woke up twice that night. Both times, he was convinced he heard a child laughing somewhere inside the house. Soft, distant laughter, echoing through the halls. He lay there in the dark, listening, but it always stopped before he could figure out where it was coming from. What bothered him the most wasn't the boy on the ice or the figure in the window. It was the light. That sudden, blinding flash that appeared out of nowhere. My dad and Mark talked about it for years afterward, trying to come up with some explanation. Lightning, a flare, fireworks from some distant town. Nothing fit. There was no source. It happened twice, and then it was gone. They cut the trip short after that. My dad said they never mentioned that night to my mom or to Julia. Not for years. At least he still doesn't know what happened out there. He's told me this story 3 or 4 times over the years, and every time he gets to the part about the light, he just stops talking for a moment. I asked him once if he thought it was something supernatural. He just shrugged and said he didn't know what else it could have been.